Not exactly hidden. The rabbi's woman clearly finishes her evaluation first and rushes him. She fakes him out 3 times with teleportation and tries to get around his ability to sense. He simply hits the whole area around him with atmospheric control and kicking up a whirlwind. The edge of a sword still scrapes against his armor and leaves a gouge. The mono-serration ripping at the titanium tritite alloy and ceramic plating can only barely resist the weapon. Better than nothing. She comes again and he parries with the heavy staff that the control bar can double as. It easily takes reinforcement and buys him enough time to reconstitute and reinforce his armor further. He then makes another twist and does the smart thing. He puts on his helmet. All the rest of his armor was hidden under civilian-looking clothing, but having the helmet on the whole time would have given things away. Even as he puts it on, there's a twist of axiom, and before he can blink, the brutally sharp swords are skittering off the diamond-reinforced view visor. Not even hiding that you're here for war, are you? Fine, the rabbi says, and her weapons start glowing. From the blades, outlines emerge and grow. Now her swords are the central point of massive light constructs. She gives them a twirl and ends up gouging the ground around her. The projection blades are just as deadly as the real ones and have many times the reach. Interesting, he mutters to himself. So she really is an extreme melee fighter, is she? His time for contemplation is already over as he's suddenly forced to parry all 4 blades with the control bar. His axiom, reinforced Kutha, is effectively unbreakable, but due to some other effect of the projected blades, they're simply unstoppable. When the unstoppable meets the unbreakable is made to move. He's sent crashing through a park bench as the fact that he's fighting the projection and not the actual blade the woman is holding has made physics throw up its hands in disgust. That parry was a brutal event on his end and a casual flick of her wrists. As he skids to a stop, he stops messing around and instantly the ground around him starts shifting. It's time to show this little lady exactly why only the best can fight a sorcerer. In a flash, the floor is completely covered in tough mycelium growths, and he winds up a brutal swing and vanishes just as he's bringing it down to her level. The ringing echo as his teleporting attack lands him a brutal blow on her head is as satisfying as it's sudden. She rolls and teleports away, but he can see all around her and be wherever she doesn't want him to be. He woodwalks and slams the control bar into the middle of her back. He feels something pop in her as she screams in agony. He can almost sympathize. Fighting a sorcerer is just unfair. Fighting a well-equipped and armored soldier is also unfair, and fighting a devious bastard is even worse. Throw all that in a blender and you've got nothing less than a nightmare to deal with. Although, speaking of blenders, Miss Bunny here apparently has negative amounts of quit as she goes from screaming woman to a tornado of blades and brutality that he has to walk away from. The mycelium carpet is giving off plenty of spores from the tiny hidden caps, so he has 3 dimensions in his woodwalking. He vanishes and appears above her, thrusting down with the heavy pole and breaking her momentum. She recovers in a flash and in a move rarely seen outside of a stripper's repertoire latches a leg around it and starts spinning on the pole. Unlike the stripper, she's less titillating and more eviscerating. So he abandons the attack and walks away with the pole. His opponent corrects nearly instantly and rises up, seemingly startled in that he's not even facing her direction, nor moving. She's clearly wondering what his game is, and the answer is mental. He can see her through the bright forest, but she doesn't seem to understand that. He needs to think a little more. He's always been bad at reading people, and even with Sir Philip's tutoring, he still struggles. She starts sneaking up on him as he contemplates her earlier words. Her steps are utterly silent, but he can see her, so it's no concern. Still, did she say that to put him down as a man with the assumption that men are spoiled and unused to strife? Or was it more sincere? If it was an attempt at intimidation, then it's to be ignored. ignored as he feigns ignoring her as she brings back her sword for a 4-part stab aimed at the joints where armor has to be weaker to allow movement. He vanishes as she starts to move, but instead of getting distance, he's right next to her and her arms are already extended. With the control bar in the middle of her arms, he pins her against it with his sheer mass advantage and knees her in the side. She's gone in a teleport and he simple straightens up. She's holding her side. He thought he felt a rib give a bit more than the others. She must be in agony at this point, which brings him to the second possibility of what she said earlier. If she was sincere, then she's either a hypocrite of the highest order or is supremely ignorant of what kind of place this is. 3 options, he mutters to himself, and it echoes in the reinforced helmet. The pause had given the rabbis time enough to catch her second wind and use Axiom to right the damages he had done to her. She straightens up and is clearly contemplating the next attack. She quickly finds a solution and he decides it's time. Words can be weapons too, after all. So, which is it? He asks her, and whatever she was planning, such a thing wasn't part of it. She pauses and considers. Which is what? She demands. Earlier when you said you were taught not to hit men, there are only 3 reasons you'd say that. 1 was to try and scare me. The second was if you're a hypocrite of the highest order, and the third is if you're truly ignorant as to what's going on. Ignorant? How dare you? How dare you attack this place of healing? She screams with a charge. Instead of teleporting, he dodges to the side. His jacket may not be long enough for a proper swoosh, but it flaps at least somewhat dramatically as he dodges. Place of healing? Where do you think we are, woman? He demands as he weaves away from a blindingly fast flourish of the swords and takes a cheeky swipe with the control bar to interrupt it and make an opening for himself. No dice. St. Lemia's orphanage for abused boys, you disgusting monster. She screams out, and behind the helmet Vernon's eyebrows go up. Oh, they had this woman good and fooled. Which is a shame, as she's got a lot of fight in her and apparently a lot of righteous indignation and valorous rage to carry her further. She turns with her swords, erupting with the silhouettes again, and this time he's ready for it. The reinforcement pattern he's sheathing his control bar in turns erratic, without losing strength, and the projections of the swords shatter against his staff and he catches the physical blades on it. And you never looked into the rooms? You never listened? You have ears the size of your forearm and you heard nothing, he demands incredulously. Here was something almost as bad as an abuser, a useful idiot. Someone that another party directs to attack other people, and they do so with all the fervor of a crusading army. Because they're fighting for the right cause, when in truth all they are is a rube sent to die. And now she's against him. Perfect. What's there to hear? That you've been having your women disguised as police officers kidnapping all the donors and sponsors of this place? This haven away from abusive monsters. Die, you wretched filth! She screams at him as she outright rips the local Axiom to bend to her will. The resulting explosion sends him tumbling back and the control bar goes flying. He can see stars in his eyes, and that's never a good sign. Time to stop fucking around then. He woodwalks and grabs the bar before vanishing again. The rabbis has switched to another type of teleportation that causes an explosion wherever she goes and an implosion wherever she leaves. He keeps ahead of her by only a fraction as he studies. He learns. He adapts, and now he overcomes. He has the pattern. He throws a basketball-sized mushroom with papery skin right at her, and she slices into it, causing the fine dust-like spores to spread everywhere in an enormous cloud. Hundreds of others grow everywhere and detonate before she can blink, and the entire area is utterly saturated in sight-concealing spores. The sheer axiom running through them blinds that sense and leaves her with only sound. Sound he can project. It's a real pity girl. He projects, and as she does the explosion and implosion again, he studies the pattern further. If he's going to pull this off, he needs to be exact. That they have you so thoroughly fooled. I don't want to hear about fooling from a man who betrays his own for profit. She screams in fury as her wild attack comes up empty. He had tried to get her to run into a decorative boulder, but her reflexes are on a level where she hopped over it despite having maybe a microsecond of warning. Heck, bunny woman, hopped. It certainly makes my job harder, he says, and the dual explosion and implosion goes off again. He tracks it easily. He just needs a few more. Now I have to take you alive rather than kill you. What? She demands before stopping. Oh, is she? Clearly she has caught wise in some way as a massive sweep of air causes all the spores to scatter and thin. Revealing Vernon watching calmly, he's almost got her number. The woman, like most people, is very pattern reliant, and the core of all of her teleports uses the same sort of pattern. He just needs to jam that and everything falls apart. She loses her mobility, and then he can get to the prickly work of disarming and then containing her. He wood walks away from the next exploding teleport slash, and then is forced to warp even faster as she speeds up again. The shrieking call of his armor getting slashed assaults his ears, and even though he reflexively starts to repair it, it's a hell of an indicator that it's only going to slow her down and not stop her now that she's got a proper mat on. Still, the willfully blind can be even worse than the actively malicious, because the malicious know to temper their attitudes and at least hide their bad behavior. The blind will cause unimaginable harm and think they're righteous. They'll be proud of the damage they do and think you're evil for trying to fix it. They must be stopped. Fool. He goads her as she explodes in a flurry at him again. And fool she is. She's used the trick too many times, spilled too many secrets. He knows her now. He swings for her head, and he can see her emotions play in the axiom. He knows her now. Rage, turning to slight surprise, then massive surprise, then panic as she realizes what he's done. The bar smashes into her face and sends her to the ground as if her strings had been cut. When all your tricks and tactics fail, a metal pole to the face will drop you. As she loses grip on her swords, the axiom flow is disrupted, and he warps them using the airborne spores into the bright forest. She's disarmed and trying not to vomit or pass out in pain. He stands over her, a tower of power before an unworthy supplicant. Clang! Her foot had rocketed backwards with unnatural speed and unerringly hit his cup. It still hurt, but he wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. He was going to have an interesting bruise, though. The bar comes down and she rolls out of the way and springs up. Her eyes are wide and uncertain now. He's taken away her weapons and her main method of attack. What else can... She focuses the axiom around her fingers and her nails project cutting auras. Interesting. She's clearly got some cat in her as she comes out swinging faster than a tiger on speed. However, he's done playing around and he ups his own speed. Her reaction time is impressive, but the swing of the bar is just a distraction to get her eyes off him for a moment. His leg sweeps her as she ducks, and he carries the momentum into a massive crash into her stomach. He gets her wind, and she vomits as the swing ruptures organs. She is, however, not in danger as a human would be. Her weaker digestive system means there's no acid going to town when you give someone the mother of all gut shots. "Please stop fighting. I don't want to kill you," he says, even as she twitches on the ground. He kneels down and reaches for her head to knock her out safely and maybe get her to a hospital. But she's still got fight as she slams her hands into his wrist with bullet-like force. "Goddamn woman, there isn't a drop of dun in you," he says as she fights the axiom effect as best she can. Her kicks ring out against his armor, and she starts applying the kind of force to his armored wrist that a hydraulic press is usually needed for. Then she goes still. She's resting. She's fine. He lets out a breath and sweeps her up into his arms. He focuses. The area is secure. He taps his communicator. Their champion here was a rube. She thought she was defending an orphanage. I'm getting her to a hospital. Vernon reports and quickly receives a confirmation. 34 seconds later, he's marching at double speed into an emergency room with the woman he nearly broke in half.